The gentleman's time is up. The gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Moore, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today's hearing is about restoring certainty and common sense to the way we regulate community banks. In my home state of North Carolina, of course, Charlotte is part of Charlotte's my district. We have a good number of banks and financial institutions there. We rely on our local banks to provide small business loans, mortgages, and financial services that keep our families and our communities thriving. Many of these banks are locally owned, deeply invested in their communities, and essential to our economy. Yet instead of supporting community banks, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB, has been driving up costs, increasing red tape, and making it harder for them to serve their customers. And you all have answered a number of questions. I notice this is a common theme of coming back to this same agency. And by the way, thank you for sitting here for almost 3.5 hours. That's been a tough assignment, Mr. Chairman, for these witnesses. Thank you for doing this. But I think we're getting a sense that Section 1071 is a leading rule that's an example of a big government agenda at CFPB. And it seems that this rule, from the testimony you provided so far, the other questions, is forcing small banks to collect, I believe there's reference to already over 80 different data points on every small business loan application, including intrusive personal financial information on business owners. So it's not just a paperwork burden, as you've all already spoken to, but it is a mandate that discourages lending to small businesses and ultimately reduces access to capital for small businesses, particularly in rural communities, as my good friend from Iowa was just commenting about. The other thing that's very frightening to me in this agency is that the CFPB is operating with no accountability. And I don't know how many Americans are aware of this disastrous policy that was passed and the way it was implemented under the previous administration under President Biden. But it seems that we have a choice, that we can either continue down this path of bureaucratic red tape that will ultimately lead to economic stagnation, or we can institute common sense reforms that allow community banks to lend, to grow, and to support their local economies. So I look forward to working with you all, look forward to working with your peers and my colleagues here in this committee and in the House so that we can get this right. I do have a couple of questions, but I don't want to be repetitive of other questions that have been asked. But the first question would be to Ms. Ramirez-Rainey. In the final days, and this has been mentioned earlier, but in the very final days of the Biden administration, Director Chopra used his final days to issue a flurry of harmful regulations. What I would say is, one, if you had to narrow it down to 1, 2, or 3, which would you say are the most concerning that you've seen? And two, how, if not rolled back, how would these policies affect small businesses and put American banks and businesses at a disadvantage internationally?
So I'm not as familiar with what happened in the last 24 hours. What I think I would like to speak about is to pick up one more piece. As I think about most harmful, I go straight to 1071. And there's one more piece that we haven't talked about as much, and it's the ripple effect back to the small businesses, as you were alluding to. The last thing small businesses need in this country is the commoditized approach to small business lending, which is what this rule would require. And again, as we've demonstrated in multiple aspects, small businesses don't need one-size approach. No two small community banks look alike, no two small businesses look alike, nor should their lenders treat them as if they were alike.
Yes, ma'am. Well, thank you. And Mr. Kennedy, a question for you, sir. The CFPB's scrutiny of non-traditional banking services such as the fintech partnerships has made it harder, I would argue, and I believe there's testimony to this, for banks to innovate and to offer modern financial products. Given that, how would you suggest that Congress set clear limits on the CFPB's role in regulating financial technology? And secondly, how would you define that the current uncertainty is affecting the industry?
Well, the CFPB has a trickle-down effect on banks under $10 billion, of course, and so I think having clear guidelines from the agencies that really regulate banks and understand banks and the relationship of fintechs is extremely important. I think we've all got to recognize in the regulatory and the business world, we've got to work together. Things move very rapidly, and we've got to work cooperatively. So that's my thoughts.
Thank you, sir. I yield back the balance. I give you back
the
25
gentleman
seconds of
back.
your